Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I want to take a quick bit of my time to give my review on the new Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu. It's been quite the topic, and one that has been met with a lot of polarizing responses. I'm not talking about the actual reviews themselves, but just kind of the journey in general. So yeah, let's get right down to it. Now, before I even talk about it, I just want to discuss my experience getting into The Mandalorian and just Star Wars in general. Now, of course, The Mandalorian, it was a show that launched back in 2019. I mean, this was actually one of the first shows that dropped on Disney Plus back when Disney was actually launching itself in November of 2019. I remember because I actually watched the first episode on the first day that the streaming service was launched, and I think that a lot of us didn't even imagine what the show was going to be about. I think, again, it was all described as a spaghetti western space opera type of, mind-blending kind of genre. And it wasn't until we watched the first episode, or at least I watched the first episode, that, I don't think a lot of us would have imagined that the series or the episode was going to end off with the biggest reveal, I guess, of Star Wars century, which is the fact that the Mandalorian found a Baby Yoda-like creature. And I think from a long time we were calling him Baby Yoda. Of course, at the time they were addressing him as a child, as more of the official way of calling him. And yeah, it was quite a journey with the first two seasons, because it was you saw this very special relationship between the Mandalorian and the child. I mean, it was very similar to a father-son surrogate relationship that we were witnessing, and I think that really stole the hearts of, all of us. I mean, especially for me. I absolutely fell in love with Baby Yoda at the time, that I have all this merchandise in my room. I had friends buying me Baby Yoda merchandise, child merchandise. I actually just recently bought one with the one on the shoulder pad, and I was at Disney World, so I was I'm just gonna buy this because then Mandalorian and Grogu was coming out, I might as well just get it. So I was a huge fan of the show right from the beginning, and I mean, the first two seasons were absolutely fantastic. Especially, I cannot even express my reaction to the season 2 finale. I still remember it was so late at night when I was watching that episode, because I'm that type of person where I'm not gonna delay the watch. I'm gonna watch it right when the episode itself becomes available. And back in those days, Disney Plus episodes were dropping at 3 a.m. in the morning in Eastern time. Thank God that you actually changed that since then. But back in those days, it was dropping at 3 a.m. in the morning. So, of course, I am literally watching this episode where everyone else is sleeping and I'm awake. And I remember just watching the whole sequence with Luke Skywalker coming out, kind of doing his old Jedi ways, going all cool. And, I mean, it was just... wow, I cannot even tell you how much I was losing my mind. I think I was screaming so much that, I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of anger some people who were sleeping, which, I mean, you're dealing with so many emotions, which, again, I'm so happy now that Disney has since changed that formatting. Now we're now seeing more episodes at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which I feel like is a lot better way of doing these kinds of viewing. So again, but that's just me digressing. But yes, I remember just being absolutely just stunned by the season 2 finale, and I think a lot of us at the time thought that was going to be the end. So we were all pretty shocked that there was going to be season 3. It's how do you get around doing a season 3 when Mandalorian and Grogu had since split? But of course, the Book of Boba Fett happened. That kind of set their reconciliation, or set their reunification, and then set the journey for season 3. Now, of course, I think when we are discussing The Mandalorian and Grogu, there were a lot of challenges going into this movie. One being the fact that season 3 was just not great, and it's so unfortunate because I was not able to do any reactions for the first 2 seasons because I did not actually have this channel back then. But I believe I did do the reaction for season 3, and I think I was very upfront about my disappointment with season 3 because it was just a very messy season. It seemed as though the Mandalorian was really sidelined. He didn't really have a whole lot to do. It became more of a Bo-Katan story, which I didn't mind, but it's this, the foundation of the show is the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and Grogu, and just to kind of pivot from them just felt a little bit off. And then it's just all the story arcs were all over the place. Even the subplots just seemed a little messy, and odd. So season 3 definitely put out a little sour taste. So of course, when we were all hearing about the fact that, you know, Disney was pursuing a movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, I think a lot of us were really a little bit confuzzled. It's like, okay, this isn't too much of a bad idea, but also like, will this work? And I think that ended up becoming a big question of this film, is like, can it really work? Because one, not everyone has seen the Mandalorian series, and so you're already excluding a lot of, you know, people who had not seen the show, especially for any Star Wars fan who never seen the Mandalorian. Like, let's think about that. And then secondly, it's like, how can you execute this movie, especially given the fact that the reputation of Disney at the time has been the greatest. I think this is actually the first movie in 7 years since we've had any kind of Star Wars movie. The last was The Rise of Skywalker, and let's not comment about that. I was just a quick thought. I was not a big fan of Rise of Skywalker. I just disliked it a lot. So that tells you everything. So there's already a really iffy reputation when it came to Disney's Star Wars era, especially going into, you know, the 2020s, and, you know, when you're looking at the shows like Book of Boba Fett and, you know, Obi-Wan kind of just doing, you know, all right, a little bit of a disappointment. And it's like the only good thing that's come out in like the last 5 years has been Andor. It's like, okay, well, Star Wars is not in a very good position right now. Of course, we do have one other Star Wars movie coming out next year, which is Starfighter, which we'll talk about later, but we have our first Star Wars movie in 7 years. A lot is going on with this film. There's a lot of risk behind it. It's very daring. So, of course, when the trailers came out last year, it was not the greatest impression, of course. I think for me, even I got the impression that this movie should have been more like, you know, a season 4 episode than really a movie. It didn't seem like a movie kind of vibe. It didn't have that kind of aura. So there was already a lot of marketing issues with The Mandalorian and Grogu, and then it wasn't until, I would say, the latest trailer that I would say I actually was like, okay, this finally looked like a movie. But you shouldn't have to wait until the final trailer to kind of get that impression, which is like probably the worst things to ever do. So yeah, there hasn't been a lot of great promotion for The Mandalorian and Grogu, and because of that, the responses ahead of the movie's release has been very polarizing. People are just very uninterested, unimpressed. People have been having second thoughts about whether to even see this film. There's even questions about whether this was maybe the right film to even be the first film in 7 years. So yeah, lots of discussions about that. Even I was just kind of like, is this worthwhile? Now, of course, on the movie's out, I've seen it myself. I think a lot of people are not talking about it. Of course, reviews were a little bit on generally positive, but also mixed side. It's not necessarily the best movie from what a lot of people have said. So, but that being the case, again, watching movies is a subjective thing. Everyone has different opinions. So, and that's something that I've always said. You know, don't just go by what critics say. If you feel like you want to check this movie out, check it out. Boom. Okay. So yeah, that's that whole thought. But yeah, let's go right down into the movie itself, because I've now seen it. I've given my thoughts about it. I've been thinking about, like, I've processed it. So here's what I would say. Generally speaking, I would say this is a really fun film, contrary to what a lot of critics have been saying. Like, I think this is not a bad film in comparisons to what I've seen in the past. Like, I would say, like, if you were to compare this to, like, Rise of Skywalker, I definitely would say it's a lot better than Rise of Skywalker. But also, like, that's kind of, like, the low bar anyway, so that's not necessarily, like, the standard that you should be using. But I would say it's definitely better than a lot of Star Wars movies that we've had in the modern era. But that being the case, it's definitely not the best Star Wars movie, without a doubt. Like, it doesn't even exceed anything like Empire Strikes Back, or if we were to think about the modern era with the, you know, Disney acquisition, post-Disney acquisition, then it's going to be, you know, Rogue One. Like, it's not in the level of Rogue One, without a doubt. But I will say that The Mandalorian and Grogu, for the most part, it's a really fun movie. I had a good time. It's very action-packed. They do not simp on the action, which is great, because I think that's definitely played a big part in why the show was kind of really intriguing, because there's a lot of action. But when it comes to the actual movie itself, I would say that there are certain things that did really surprise me. One being the fact that there were certain arcs that I would say really stood out, and then others that didn't. Now, of course, those that really did stood out, I mean, Grogu, I think he was honestly the star of this movie. Like, and that, I mean, that's considering the fact that the movie is called The Mandalorian and Grogu, and there are moments in the film that, you know, when you're watching Grogu and comparing it to the series, like in the series, like he's had his moments. He's just kind of there to react to what Mando's doing, and he doesn't really get to talk, of course, just because he hasn't developed that speech yet. But even that being the case, like I think what I will give compliments to is that Grogu really felt like a character in this movie compared to what we've seen in the past with the first 3 seasons of Mandalorian. So, and what I mean by that is the fact that we got to see a little bit more of what he does when, you know, the Mandalorian isn't always helping him or supporting him. And I think this is a movie that really showcased a lot of the emotions of Grogu, and I think and because of that, I think that really became the highlight of this movie, simply for the fact that Grogu really stole the show. And I want to give a lot of props, because one thing that I was absolutely impressed by was the mobility of Grogu throughout the film. And when you compare that to the Mandalorian, like of course they had to use his like, I think his space pod looking thing to really help him travel throughout most of the series, or at least the first 2 seasons. I can't really remember a whole lot of season 3 because I've only seen season 3 once, and that's where I'm gonna stop at with season 3. As I said, I was not a big fan of it. So, but from what I can recall from the first 2 seasons, there wasn't a whole lot of mobility with him, because one being the fact that he was always in that orb thingy that was helping him travel, and then or either that or the Mandalorian himself was helping him travel. So we didn't really get to see a whole lot of mobility with Grogu. But that being the case, you have to also remember that the actual like behind the scenes, that Grogu is a puppet, like somebody's puppeteering Grogu, and then they add like a little bit of the CG stuff to kind of like refine the visual details, and then that's what ends up being on the show. But even that being the case, what I will say is that in this film, like I have to give a lot of props to how much mobility that we see of Grogu. Like he actually felt like a real character in this movie as a result of the fact that he actually was a little bit more refined as a character. He had a lot more movement. I think that really benefited from the fact that Grogu was actually starting to stand out as a character, which compared to like in the series, he didn't really always have those kinds of moments. So that's one thing I want to say. I think I gotta give you props to, like, you have to give a lot of praise for those who are behind the I wanted to say this production, I think visual effects team, those who, I guess you can say art direction. But yeah, I think that really was like one of the key things that really kind of shocked me, was the fact that, you know, we saw a lot of great a lot of great direction when it came to really executing Grogu as a character. Like he actually felt like a character, which is something I was really concerned about, because I mean, given the fact that it is titled The Mandalorian Grogu, it's like, okay, how much of Grogu are we going to actually see him as a character? And I think this movie does accomplish the fact that we do see a lot of Grogu, and that he actually himself is a character who really stands out whenever he has his moments. So there's one of that. 2, I would also want to compliment the fact that one of the more stronger arcs in this movie, and that really surprised me, was Rhoda the Hutt. Now, when I heard that Rhoda the Hutt was going to be one of the characters in this movie, I simply thought it was going to be like more of like a cameo. That's where I was sensing was going to be the case with his character. And of course, Jeremy Allen White was going to be the voice of it, which honestly, I was kind of questioning whether or not it was really him voicing the role, because like it didn't sound like Jeremy Allen White. But then once you get to like the end of the movie, you actually start to hear a little bit more of his voice. I was like, okay, that's Jeremy right there. But what really shocked me with Rhoda the Hutt was that we got to see a very different side of him, someone who has a little bit of a deeper story. I think of all the characters, he had the deepest story, like that he really is explaining about his legacy as a Hutt in comparison to his father Jabba, how he's trying to be different from him. That really shocked me. And I think of all the characters, he was the one who really evolved the most in terms of his arc. And I think that's where I really thought was like, okay, it's really surprising that a supporting character has this much depth and this much evolution, that, you know, I have to give some props to that, because I was like, okay, like by the time we got to like the half point of the movie, I was actually rooting for Rhoda the Hutt. So there's that. Like, I mean, that I have to give some compliments as well. But that being the case, and then of course again the action sequences are absolutely great. The first opening is really good. Can I just say the score in this movie by Ludwig Göransson absolutely cooked. The one that everyone's been talking about, the Sakari one, and I'm not gonna even lie, when I first heard the score for the Sakari, like the Sakari score, I was actually tapping my toes. I was like, boom, boom, boom. I was like, oh my god, this is like a really awesome soundtrack. And I mean, again, props to Ludwig Göransson. I mean, this is a guy who is like a freaking music genius because he keeps really just wowing everyone when it comes to his ability to compose the scores with any movie. I mean, I think he just recently won for Sinners, I believe, as well. So yeah, I mean, he did it again with Mandalorian and Grogu. I mean, he's done the original show as well, and he somehow was managed to even elevate that in the movie as well and make it so that it's like as a huge bop. So props to that. I think the score was honestly one of the top things, like one of the highlights of the movie. So you had Grogu, you had Road of the Hutt, you had the score being like really absolutely phenomenal. I think those were maybe the highlights of this movie. And of course action, lots of great action. But that being the case, this is not the most flawless film. I think I've been very clear about that. It's not the best Star Wars movies for a reason. I think it comes down to two main issues. One being the fact that the structure of this movie does seem more like it was supposed to be a season 4 that was compressed into a movie. And that makes a lot of sense because Jon Favreau, who I believe is a director of this film, he actually has said many times that initially he had written season 4 of The Mandalorian, and the idea initially was that, you know, it was going to build up to like the whole, you know, Thrawn thing, and it was going to set up Ahsoka season 2 or something like that, but then they decided to kind of just make it into a movie instead. And so it makes sense that he used whatever he had created for what could have been a season 4, and then instead changed that up, modified it to a point where it's now a movie. You can see how that is kind of an issue in this movie, because there are the way that it's structured is very interesting and then sometimes odd. I would say maybe the first half of the film, or maybe like I'll say this, the first and third act of the movie were probably the best parts of the film. I think it's when we get into the middle part that it gets a little bit really messy, and that's what I'm trying to say is the fact that the structure itself was really, really clumsy. And that's something because of the fact that, you know, the way that the movie is structured is that you're going through different aspects of what's going on in this journey with the Mandalorian and Grogu. And as you're going through this journey, there's like so many things are happening. You have one moment, you have one mission done, okay, boom, then you have another mission, then you have another mission. Oh, it's like, okay, now we have this situation, then like the way that it's structured, like you can tell that this was supposed to be like maybe 4 or 5 episodes of the Mandalorian season 4, and I was really starting to spot that a lot when I was getting into the second half of the film, where it's like, okay, like again, this one moment, and I'm trying not to spoil too much, but something happens with the Mandalorian, Grogu comes in, kind of steps in, and watching that specific sequence alone, I was thinking like, this seems like this should have been an episode of The Mandalorian season 4. That was really going through my mind. And I think the structure of it made it sound so that this should have been a season 4 of The Mandalorian rather than a movie. And it makes me wonder like what the actual script would have looked like had it been a season 4 instead. So that was one big issue. And I think as a result of the issue with the structure and how it was then modified to become a movie, this is where, you know, the Mandalorian kind of becomes a little bit of an issue. Now, that's not to say the Mandalorian isn't the Mandalorian. He's still the Mandalorian, and he kicked ass in a lot of the sequences. So props to that. And of course, if you don't know, you know, yes, we do see Papa Pedro. We do see Papa Mando. I mean, honestly, again, one of the more highlighted moments in the movie where we got to see a lot of Papa Mando being the father figure to Grogu, which I have to say I was having a lot of those feel good moments. But aside from those, when it comes to actual Mandalorian himself and his evolution and his arc, it was kind of non-existent. A lot of that's just simply because of the fact that he's just on a mission and that's it, and he's going through a mission. Now I would say maybe there was one point in the film that we actually start to see some kind of substance with his arc where he is, and this is something again that has been highlighted a lot in the series itself, which is the fact that can you imagine a life when the Mandalorian is no longer in the world and Grogu has to go on his own? Because again, remember, Grogu comes from a species that we're still is kind of a little bit of a question mark, but we know that he and Yoda come from the same species. They last for a very long time. They have a high life expectancy. Like, I think Yoda himself lasted for like 800 years, and Grogu is only like just over 50 years old, so he still has a long way to go. And yet, Din Djarin is not gonna make it past like another couple more years, and so it's like, how are we going to prepare for the child to then live a life beyond Din Djarin? And this was kind of addressed a little bit, and there was a moment where we kind of see where he's trying to like address this a little bit, but then it's like, okay, we completely forget about that arc and we go back to the fact that we need to address the whole Road to the Hut thing. So yeah, so that's where I was just saying that, like, I felt like the Mandalorian was maybe the least substantial character in this film, simply for the fact that he doesn't really have a whole lot going on in his character arc. The fact that there isn't really a whole lot of evolution. He's just doing mission, and there isn't something more of a personal level for him. Now, of course, again, this makes me wonder if what would have happened if we had a season 4 instead of a movie. Like, would we had explored more of Mandalore, or maybe a little bit more about Mandalorian? And I think another big issue is the fact that we kind of already concluded Din Djarin's side of his personal problems. Like, of course, the fact that his helmet was taken off at one point, and now he feels disgraced that he's broken his oath, and then that, of course, was resolved back in season 3. So it's like, what else can you really do with the Mandalorian at this point? So it makes sense that there isn't really a whole lot left to do with the Mandalorian, which actually now becomes a huge challenge for the character himself. It's like, what else can you do moving forward if we're going to continue off with this character? So yeah, I would say those were probably the two biggest issues I had with the film, simply for the fact that, it wasn't the most substantial Star Wars film. It didn't have a whole lot of depth. I mean, it's not the most politically charged film as well, other than the fact that it's just a fun ride where the Mandalorian's going on a couple of adventures, going on a couple missions, especially in his whole arc against the Hutts. And so, which again, I was really surprised how much that was the main focus of this movie, which I didn't even expect was going to be the way it is. But I think also when you look at it, it seemed as though that this should have been more like an episode than rather like a movie. But that being the case, it doesn't take with the fact that I had a good time watching this film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like basically like a fun ride. Again, as I said, it's not the greatest Star Wars movie I've seen, but it's a really decent Star Wars film, and I think that it's at least one that isn't as bad as some of the other Star Wars movies that we've seen. I think maybe in comparison to what the critics are saying, I know right now the movie has like a 61% or something like that, but I mean, it's not a bad film. I think it's worthwhile watching. I think it is one that I would say that it's one that would be worthwhile for like a family. I think this is definitely a family friendly adventure movie, so it's like one of those kinds of things. But yeah, that being the case though, like, despite the fact that this may not be the best of the Mandalorian arcs I've seen, I do hope and wish that we do get to see more of Grogu. I think this movie did prove that there is more to do in terms of characters like Grogu. Like, he still is just beginning stages of like his Jedi world, trying to become a foundling, being the apprentice to the Mandalorian, and the fact that he was honestly one of the standouts means that there's still more to come. And I do hope that we get to see more of Grogu in the future, because I know that fact that Dave Filoni's gonna be taking over as the Lucasfilm president once Kathleen Kennedy's done, and then it's like, okay, what's gonna be next for Star Wars? Now, we know for a fact that we're gonna have Starfighter, so that's coming out next year. That's the one directed by Sean Levy and starring Ryan Gosling. I believe that's like post. If I have this right, it might be post Rise of Skywalker, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I might have to look this up. But that's actually the only other completed Star Wars movie that we've had so far. Beyond that, I don't even know what is really left of Star Wars in terms of like what's in development. Like, Andor has already ended. I believe we do have the Darth Maul series, but that's animation, so that's that. I don't know if there's gonna be anything. I know we have Ahsoka season 2 coming out. That got delayed till next year. So we do have a couple of projects in development and ready to go. But in terms of the movie sphere, there isn't a whole lot going on. And of course, like, there was the whole Rey movie that was supposed to have happened like a while ago, and it still has yet to even have a approved script. They're like nowhere near close to even starting production with that. So yeah, it does get a little bit concerning, the fact that there isn't really a whole lot left to do in terms of Star Wars, especially when it comes to the movie side. And again, we only have one other movie that's been completed, which is Starfighter. But yeah, this is the first one that we've gotten in about 7 years. I think it's a really decent viewing, but again, I do wonder if maybe this may not been the greatest or maybe the best option in terms of the first film in 7 years. Maybe Starfighter should have been the first. Who knows? Maybe I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I know the movie's not. I know there's been a whole lot of discussions about the box office, and I think that's another whole discussion that's causing some, like, okay, well, should have this been the best, like, was this the best decision in terms of doing a Mandalorian Grogu movie? But even then, I'm still gonna try and root for this film because I think it's worthwhile watching. It's, again, as I said, it's a really fun adventure movie that is definitely one that would cater to a lot of families, especially seeing one where we see this adorable relationship between the Mandalorian and Grogu, because I think that's still a key thing that continues on in this movie, that they kept the essence of that. I think as long as the essence of that is still there, I think it's worthwhile seeing. And I think you can actually watch this without seeing any of the episodes of The Mandalorian. I mean, I would still suggest trying to get an idea of it, but I think I can still make it through watching this movie without knowing anything from the series. I think Jon Favreau has done a good job to make it so that it still has its own identity in a way. But as I said, I think this is where I wonder if maybe this should have been a series than a movie, just because of the way that the actual story was structured. So yeah, that's all to say about the Mandalorian Grogu film. As I said, I had a really good time watching it for the most part. Again, there are certain things that were highlights. There are certain things that could have been improved. But even that, it's still a very decent viewing. But that being the case, I know everyone's going to check out, anyone who's a big Star Wars fan is probably going to be checking this out. It's, again, the first Star Wars movie in 7 years that we've gotten. Yet it is a little bit polarizing. Like, I wonder how things are going to go. I think the audience response has been a lot better. But that being the case, I want to know your thoughts. If you have seen the Mandalorian Grogu film, if so, I want to know what you think about it. What do you think were some of the highlights? What were some of the more flawed features? What do you think could have been better? Do you think this should have been a season 4 of The Mandalorian? Or maybe it was best to do a movie? In terms of that, how do you feel about the fact that we do have a more Star Wars film, which is Starfighter? Does that make you feel a little bit more confident about that? Or does that make you a little bit concerned about Star Wars future in general? Let me know your thoughts below. Make sure to like and subscribe.